We are joined now by John Campbell, Deputy Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce in Mississippi. We thank you for joining us on At Issue.
Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
How important is agriculture to Mississippi?
Tell you, agriculture is Mississippi's #1 industry. It represents an $8 billion a year farm gate. 30% of our population is either directly or indirectly employed in the agriculture industry. So it is Mississippi's #1 industry. It's the driver of our economy and so important to our state.
Let's talk about it. We have a list here of Mississippi's top 10 agriculture commodities. At the top of the list, poultry, followed by forestry, then soybeans, cattle, corn, cotton, catfish, rice, horticulture, and hay. And forestry actually leapfrogged soybeans from 2014 to 2015, right?
That's correct. So, as you name that list off, you can see what a diverse agriculture environment we do have in Mississippi, and our ample land, fertile land, our great climate enables us to grow a multitude of crops. So it is very diverse and interesting and great for us. But as far as the forestry, historically forestry has been our number 2 commodity. In 2014, soybean prices went up considerably, $15, $16 a bushel, and for the first time ever, it took over that number 2 spot, which was great for our soybean farmers. But since then, prices ratcheted down slightly. Around $10 right now a bushel, so it is taken back to the 3rd spot, roughly 2 million acres. So it is still it's the landscape of, particularly through the Delta, you see so much soybeans compared to what you used to see cotton. But that forestry is back to the number 2 spot, and shy of a major change in commodity prices will probably stay there.
You mentioned cotton. I think especially a lot of folks outside Mississippi associate Mississippi with cotton, especially when you consider our history. I was a little surprised that it's number 6 on the list. Is it typically higher than that? So
cotton production is one of those very interesting crops. To kind of give you a point of reference, in 2006 we were planting 1.2 million acres of cotton. 2007, that fell well below 1 million acres, and we've never even gotten back close to 1 million acres. We're about 450,000 acres this year. And the unique thing about cotton is different than a grain operation is, if you're growing rice, corn, soybeans, and you want to flip-flop from year to year, you can do that with the equipment, but cotton is so specialized with the cotton pickers and planters, and particularly the gins. Once you make that investment in cotton, you've got to stay there. Or when you decide to move to another crop, you lose that infrastructure, and it's hard just to start that again. And again, once the gins shut down, they sit idle for a couple years. You just don't go crank them back up. You've got significant investment to get that going. So once you lose an infrastructure, like I said, in some of the areas we have, you really have to build an industry back. But cotton's one of those unique things, different than our grain crop, and we grow some excellent commodities here, and our yields are great. But that cotton, that crop turns over several times in a local economy, where with our grain, you harvest it, typically it goes to a grain elevator and then off on a barge it goes. So you don't have that significant direct impact to a local economy like you do with the cotton production.
Poultry at the top of the list, is that typical?
It is. Poultry actually, out of that $8 billion, represents a little over $3 billion of that $8 billion. So, and the unique thing about poultry is it's not widespread throughout the state. There's some centralized or localized areas that that's what they do. They grow poultry in those areas, and we've got great Sanderson farms here, amongst some what they call poultry integrators, and then actually you have the growers. They're contract growers, and they grow for the integrators, and really just a thriving market. We ship all over the world. And then, last year we had the scare with avian influenza. Yeah. Luckily, we did not have it here, so we avoided that. We've, across the country, have escaped that, so that's really good. We were doing a lot of preparing, and that could have really been devastating for our industry here in Mississippi.
Tell us about the crop outlook overall this year. How's it looking?
Yeah, so it's been, we got off a little rough. We had a particularly wet spring, got us a little behind. Planting particularly our row crop commodities, corn, soybeans, cotton and rice. We caught back up with some good, some fair weather. We're beginning our harvest right now, and as you know, we're kind of in a rainy cycle. So cotton does not like this overcast, rainy weather, so we're having a tremendous amount of fruit shed. The bolls are actually falling off the plant. We could see if weather doesn't turn around, we get into a drying pattern, we could see some cotton yields lag a little bit, but soybean and corn yields look really good. The key to that is, and this is, you know, like the magic 8 ball, no one knows, is what the weather's going to do from here until the end of harvest season. So you can have the best crop, our bumper crop sitting in the field today, and we have a hurricane or significant weather pattern actually be devastating. So we have to be optimistic that we're going to have favorable harvest weather. We can get this crop out of the field, and we do it in a fairly short period of time, and hopefully by November we'll have a significant portion of it out.
So many farmers live and die by what the weather does in a given week or day or year, what have you. Mississippi still ranks #1 for catfish production, but how have catfish imports impacted the industry and the farmers here? So
that's a great question. It's certainly an interesting issue and very times very complex. We're at about 60% less of the acres, catfish acres, than we were a decade or so ago, around 40,000 acres.
Is that all from the threat from the imports?
There's multiple factors: price, feed costs, but the imports have had a significant impact on our production here in Mississippi. And what you've got is a much cheaper product coming into the country, inferior product. And the issue that's at hand right now is, starting in 2008, Senator Cochran worked in our farm bill to shift catfish inspection from FDA to USDA, where USDA inspects all of our other livestock, beef, poultry, hogs. So it was a perfect fit for them to start inspecting this other farm-raised commodity. So we shifted from FDA, and it went in March 2016, from FDA to USDA. To a little back up, to kind of give you paint the picture of FDA's inspection process. They inspect less than 2% of all seafood that's imported into the country, where USDA inspects 100% of it. So through Senator Cochran's work, they shifted that in the Farm Bill to USDA. March 2016 it started. Within the first couple of weeks, we already had shipments from Vietnam and other countries being sailed from detection of carcinogens being in the shipments. So there was a...
Excuse me, but does this mean then that all of the catfish and catfish-like fish coming into America is now inspected, 100% of it?
It is. We're beginning that process. USDA's taken over, but since then, Senator McCain introduced a Senate Resolution 28 in the U.S. Senate Congressional Review Act. It circumvented the whole committee process. It passed the Senate that would take it away from USDA and give it back to FDA. So our Commissioner of Agriculture, Commissioner Cindy Hyde-Smith, is a very strong advocate of American farmers. And this is about food security for our consumers and equal standards. She got very engaged on this issue, went to Washington, really walked the halls of Congress to make sure when that Senate resolution got to the House that it was not brought up by Paul Ryan. So we've been successful thus far, keeping it in the USDA's purview. It's got to sit on Paul Ryan's desk to the end of the year, and hopefully it just dies there. But again, the importance of that inspection process being a USDA is our farmers are inspected by USDA, and our foreign imports are inspected by USDA and held to the same standards as American fish, American catfish. So we feel like, again, it's consumer protection. You want safe, affordable food supply for your family. And again, we think it's only fair that foreign imports should follow the same standards as a Mississippi or American producer.
And I get that, but what are the differences between fish grown locally and fish that are imported? Are they dangerous, what's coming in?
So there has been a pattern of products being found in imports that are not approved for use in the United States, or FDA and USDA is not approved for our food supply. Their production methods at times are much different than ours. We know ours is safe, ours is clean, it's of the highest standard, and we can't say that for sure about these imports until we start inspecting them at the same level we have through our USDA process.
Mississippi Farm Bureau is calling for immigration reform, saying that agriculture as an industry depends on immigrants for the labor they provide. And they say that any delays in processing paperwork and regulations would be a problem for the industry. What's the agency's position on that?
Yeah, so migrant workforce is critical to agriculture. To give you an example, our sweet potato growers in Vardaman, that's where we grow 95+% of our 24,000 acres of sweet potatoes. If those Vardaman sweet potato growers hired every person in that area during harvest season, they would still be a deficit for farm workers. So we've got to work with our government to find a way through that we are able to get affordable, efficient, seasonal workers into this country that are legal. And through our H-2A worker program that is for your farm workers, we can do that, but with Farm Bureau and other partners have been working with the administration to make sure that process gets to moving along. It's been a little slow, a little more cumbersome than our ag community can stand right now to get that workforce in place in a timely fashion. But without that migrant worker, we cannot produce agriculture and feed this country and this world as we are doing it today.
How do the current laws and regulations affect local farmers?
So our current laws, again, there is a structure. We've got our H-2A worker program that is for farm workers. We've got an H-2B worker program that is for your tourism, your restaurants, your food processors. So we've got the structure there. The problem with it is the bureaucracy and the paperwork in that structure that is preventing it from moving along as fast as it needs to. And that's the challenge. The structure's there, the laws are there, but the process is so slow right now that it's really impacting our growers in a negative manner.
In a way that they can't get the workers they need soon enough?
They can't get them soon enough and in enough numbers to do the job we need to do.
So what would change that? Would it take a federal law change to eliminate some of the paperwork, perhaps?
So the law is there. Again, the law is there. It's certainly as any law, we work on some things to strengthen it. It's more just the process, the paperwork process, moving it along through the system, eliminating maybe some redundant paperwork, some processes. And the key to that is making sure that when those decisions are made about that process, that the stakeholders, the farmers are at the table helping develop the process. And I think that's what we've really been missing thus far, is that person that exactly knows exactly what needs to happen to move it along. And there's just been a disconnect.
John Campbell, Deputy Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you and appreciate you having me.